My name is Stephanie F. Roberts, and I am 40 years old. Drakehold Construction was my father's company in name. On paper, his signature sat on the founding documents. His photo was on the website, and every Christmas dinner ended with him telling some version of the same story about how he built it from nothing. I stopped correcting that story around year 3, when I realized nobody at that table wanted the accurate version. The accurate version was simple. My father was a decent man with average business instincts who got very lucky having a daughter who understood contracts, client relationships, and long-game revenue development. I joined Drakehold at 24. By 28, I had restructured the entire bidding process. By 31, I had personally negotiated an 18-month hospital expansion contract that became the company's single largest revenue source. Municipal infrastructure bids, commercial development relationships, private investor pipelines. I built all of it, not because anyone asked me to, because I understood that the company my father kept taking credit for would have plateaued and quietly died without someone who knew how to grow it. My younger sister, Lucia, was the other version of the family story, 3 years younger, prettier in the way people notice immediately, and raised with the kind of ease that makes a person believe doors open because they deserve them. She smiled at the right moments. She told my parents what they wanted to hear. She had spent her entire life being the preferred one, not because she earned it, but because she was easier to love in public. When Lucia joined Drakehold at 26, she was handed a director title with a salary I knew was higher than mine, and responsibilities that never once required her to work past 5. She did not develop a single client. She attended meetings I scheduled, presented proposals I wrote, and collected a paycheck funded by revenue I generated. I did not resent it the way you might expect. I noted it, filed it, kept working. That was probably my first mistake. I had been with Everett for 5 years. He was a property valuation consultant, sharp, self-sufficient, and not the kind of man who seemed to need rescuing. I respected that immediately. We met at a commercial building where I had just closed a contract. He was there doing a valuation assessment for a separate client. We talked for 20 minutes in the parking lot, and I asked for his number before it even processed that I was doing it. We had a son, Rowan. He was 11 when everything came apart. Still, the best thing I have ever had anything to do with. The relationship with Everett had felt off for about a year before it ended. Not explosive, just quieter than it used to be. Less overlap, fewer casual touches in the kitchen, more evenings where he said he was tired, more mornings where I left before he fully woke. I put it down to work schedules and the natural compression that happens when 2 adults stop making deliberate time. I was wrong, obviously, but at the time, I believed it because it was easier, and because I trusted him. Everett told me Lucia was pregnant on a Tuesday morning. He said it carefully, standing in our kitchen with one hand around a mug of coffee he had not touched. Lucia was 10 weeks along. He said it like he was telling me news about the weather, like the sentence did not already contain a blade. I did the math in real time. Everett and I had not been intimate in over 3 months. I knew that with certainty because I had noticed the distance and tried to address it twice. Both times, he deflected. Both times, I did not push because I thought love meant giving someone room when they said they were tired. 3 months. 10 weeks. I did not say anything at first. I told him that was a lot to process and that I needed some air. Then I drove to work, sat at my desk for 20 minutes doing absolutely nothing, and called a private clinic. Not our family doctor. Not anyone in our shared orbit. I booked a consultation for that afternoon. The results came back 4 days later by secure email. Not mine. That was the first line of the report. Clinical language. Clean formatting. A meaning that took less than 1 second to land. The second thing I noticed was a secondary notation. A genetic flag the lab includes when the biological parent appears to be a close female relative of the tested woman. First-degree maternal relationship. The kind of language that means one specific thing when you have one sister. I was sitting in the clinic parking lot when I read it. I read it 3 times. Not because I could not believe it. Because I was deciding, right there with the phone in my hand, exactly how far I was willing to go. Then I drove home, made dinner, and sat across from Everett while we talked about nothing. Pardieu, dinner that night was almost ordinary. That was the disturbing part. Rowan's upcoming school assessment, a problem with the upstairs shower pressure, whether we needed to replace the guttering before winter. Everett talked about all of it like his world had not cracked open in my hands that afternoon. I answered normally, asked questions, passed the salt, cleared my plate. He had no idea. I had spent the afternoon in a clinic parking lot, rearranging the rest of my life. That night, I called Fordham at 9. He had been my personal lawyer for 6 years, separate from Drakehold's legal team, which mattered more than ever now. I told him I needed separation papers drafted, a full financial severance strategy, and a clean division of every personal asset connected to Everett. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He said he would have a preliminary structure by morning. I slept 4 hours. Not badly, efficiently. There was not much to feel yet. I was still in the part where everything becomes logistics. In the morning, I printed the clinic report in my home office while Everett was in the shower. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. When he came downstairs, I pushed the printed page across the table without speaking. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, "Yes. No denial. No performance. Just yes." "It was Lucia?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "Yes." "How long?" "Just over a year." I let that sit between us. Then I asked the only question I actually needed answered. "Does she know I know?" "No." "Does she know you were going to tell me?" He looked at me then, and that was the first real fear I saw on his face. "Stephanie, I was trying to find the right time." There is a specific kind of sentence people use when they have already spent months choosing the wrong time on purpose. I stood, took the paper back, and walked out of the kitchen. I called Lucia from the hallway. She picked up on the third ring with her usual bright voice. "Steph, hey, everything okay?" "I have the clinic report," I said. "I have the dates. You have 24 hours before everyone who matters knows." She started talking immediately. Fast. Messy. Something about complexity, about feelings, about how nobody meant for this to happen. I hung up before she got to the part where she made herself sound trapped. My parents were next. I want to be precise about this because it matters. What I expected was horror. Real horror. The kind a parent should feel when one daughter has been carrying on with the other daughter's boyfriend for over a year and is now pregnant with his child. What I got was, "Let's not do anything rash." My mother said it within 30 seconds. Too quickly. Too smoothly. My father followed with, "Family comes first," a phrase I had heard my whole life, always in situations where it meant my interests came last. Neither of them asked how I was. Neither of them expressed shock. They were in calculation mode before I finished the first sentence. That told me something. I did not address it. I simply said, "I will be in touch," and ended the call. Then I called Roman. Roman was Lucia's fiancé, a structural auditor, methodical and serious, and someone I had always privately thought was too good for my sister. I sent him a text first. "Call me when you are alone." He called within the hour. I gave him everything. The paternity report. 2 years of phone records between Lucia and Everett that I had pulled that morning. Timestamps, duration, frequency, hotel booking confirmations I found in Everett's email before he thought to change the password. I did not editorialize. I just transferred the truth cleanly, the way you hand someone documentation they have a right to. When I finished, the line stayed quiet for a long time. Then Roman said, "Thank you." He ended the call. By the end of that day, separation papers were filed, joint accounts flagged, and personal assets cleanly separated from everything attached to Everett or Drakehold. I checked into a hotel with a single bag and my laptop. That night, I opened the complete client directory for Drakehold Construction. Every active contract. Every key relationship, every decision maker at every firm that had agreed to work with us because they had agreed to work with me. I opened a new document. At the top, I typed 2 words, what I own. I want to be clear before I explain what happened next. I did not destroy Drakehold out of anger. Anger is inefficient. What I did was stop pretending the company's success belonged to anyone other than the person who had actually built it. The next morning, I called Fordham and asked one specific question. Were there any non-solicitation clauses in my employment agreement that restricted me from independently approaching clients I had personally originated? He reviewed the documents and called back 2 hours later. No. My father had never thought to include them. Lucia certainly had not known enough to add them. Nobody had considered that I might leave, because nobody had seriously considered what leaving would cost. So I started making calls. I spent the next 2 weeks making calls. Not emotional calls, not revenge calls, business calls. The difference matters. I did not approach every Drakehold client. I approached the ones whose relationship existed because of me specifically. The hospital expansion, 18 months of my life, multiple board presentations, 4 years of trust with their development director, 3 municipal infrastructure accounts that returned my calls because they knew my name, not Drakehold's, a private investor group that had asked twice whether I had ever considered going independent. I told each of them the same thing. I was establishing a consultancy. Same service, reduced overhead, continuity guaranteed. No disruption unless they wanted one. Most did not hesitate. One municipal contact said, "Honestly, Stephanie, we have been working with you, not the company. This does not change much." Within 3 weeks, Drakehold's active revenue pipeline dropped by roughly 70%. The hospital contract transferred cleanly. The municipal bids followed. 2 private investors redirected their full working relationship to my consultancy by the end of the month. Lucia, who had spent years as a director without originating a single real client, was suddenly helping run a company that had almost nothing left to run. Then the lawsuits arrived. It turned out Lucia had co-signed personal liability clauses on 2 sub-agreements during a board meeting 2 years earlier. I remembered that meeting. I remembered watching her sign without reading, because she wanted to look decisive in front of investors. When those clients transitioned away and staged payments stalled, their legal teams reviewed the paperwork and found exactly what I suspected they would find. The first suit came from a subcontractor owed money on a collapsed project. The second came from a private investor brought in specifically on Lucia's representation of projected earnings, projections built entirely from my pipeline, but presented as if she had developed them. Combined liability, just over $340,000. She did not have it. Lucia started liquidating. Her car first, then a property investment she had bought at the height of her inflated salary. Her lawyer apparently told her the repayment structure would follow her for the better part of a decade. Roman left without drama, which somehow made it land harder. No public fight, no social media explosion. Just a returned ring by courier, a quiet withdrawal from shared spaces, and one short post that said nothing directly, but communicated everything to anyone paying attention. Lucia lost her director title 3 months after I walked out. By then, the company was unraveling too fast for the title to mean anything anyway. My parents called twice that week. My mother said I was destroying the family. My father brought up inheritance, what I stood to lose if I continued down this path. I told him the inheritance was backed by a company that no longer had revenue, and suggested he sort that out before using it as leverage. My hotel lease was expiring. The separation documents came through. I signed them on a Wednesday afternoon at Fordham's office, left the building, and drove back to the hotel. That night, I called Bastien. He was an old university friend who had left the city years earlier and lived on the coast 1,200 kilometers away. I said, "I need somewhere to land." "How long?" he asked. "Permanently." He laughed once, not because it was funny, but because he understood me well enough not to ask for the entire story over the phone. Key under the mat. I did not announce that I was leaving. I did not tell Everett. I did not call my parents. I did not send a message to anyone at Drakehold. One morning I was there, the next I was not. I loaded my car with 2 bags, my work equipment, and the documents that mattered, then drove 1,200 kilometers to a coastal town that smelled like salt and old timber. Nobody knew my name there. Nobody had a claim on anything I carried. Bastian had a spare room above a bakery he had converted into a short-term rental. I took it for 3 months, while I found something permanent. The consultancy ran remotely by design. My clients did not care where I slept. The hardest part of leaving was not Everett. It was not my parents or Lucia or the collapse of Drakehold. It was Rowan. He was 11, old enough to understand that his mother had gone somewhere and was not coming back, not old enough to understand the full architecture of why. I arranged the financial trust through Fordham before I started the car. School fees, medical expenses, living support routed through Everett without commentary. Rowan would never lack anything I could provide materially. That part was non-negotiable. I wrote him 1 letter. I told him I loved him, that none of this was his fault, and that when he was older, I hoped the shape of it would make more sense than it could right then. I did not include a return address. I instructed Fordham to give my personal number only to Rowan's school registrar for genuine emergencies, and to no one else. Then I let the silence build. Back home, the damage kept moving without me. Lucia settled the subcontractor lawsuit 14 months after I left. 4 months later, Fordham sent another update. Investor suit resolved. Payment plan. Likely 6 to 7 years. I read it and did not reply. Lucia abandoned Everett around the same time the second lawsuit settled. The money was gone, and apparently so was her interest in the life she had helped destroy. She surfaced with someone new within the year. The baby was barely 2 years old. Everett's world contracted. My parents, who had spent 18 months calling him to preserve the family, redirected blame once Drakehold's collapse became undeniable. Friends drifted. He went back to property valuations at a fraction of his old income, raising 2 children without consistent support from anyone who had promised it. The first letter arrived at Fordham's office 6 months after I left. "Letter from Everett," he emailed. "Instruction?" "Hold it," I replied. "Do not open it. Do not forward any more. Just log them." After that, the confirmations arrived like a quiet record of persistence. Monthly at first, then birthdays, holidays, Christmas. Another letter logged. I never asked what they said. Par 4. 4 years passed. My consultancy grew to 5 contractors operating under my name. I had a doctor I trusted, a cafe 2 streets from my house where they started my order the moment they saw me through the window, and a small number of people whose company I actually wanted. I was not unhappy. That is not a small thing. It took deliberate construction, the same way everything else in my life worth keeping did. Back home, the situation kept deteriorating without my help. Fordham sent brief factual updates when something directly affected my arrangements. Drakehold Construction was sold, what remained of it, at a significant loss. My parents moved to a smaller house in a quieter suburb. My father's health became unreliable. My mother attempted contact several times, always through someone else, never directly through the channel I had left for emergencies. I did not answer. Lucia ended up reduced to the size of her actual capabilities. Not destroyed. Not thriving. Just smaller. She took a mid-level project coordination role at a construction firm on the other side of the country. A repayment plan followed her like a second shadow. Roman, from what I heard, moved cities and built a professional reputation entirely his own. Good. He deserved a clean life after being dragged into ours. Everett's letters kept arriving. Fordham logged them. 6 months after I left. Then monthly. Then birthdays. Holidays. Anniversaries. Christmas. Each update came as 1 line. Another letter logged. I never asked what they said. Then one evening my personal phone rang. The number I had given only to Fordham and Rowan's school registrar. I did not recognize the caller, but I answered anyway. A boy's voice came through, older than I expected. unsteady in a way that sounded like someone had rehearsed the call for days and still did not know how to survive it. "Mom?" I stood still in my kitchen. Rowan. He was 15 now. 4 years is a long time at that age. The last time I had heard his voice, he was 11, asking through a closed door if I was coming down for dinner. Now he sounded taller, older, wounded in places I had not been there to witness. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Everett died last week." I did not move. "Ovarian cancer," he continued, then stopped himself, confused by the old language everyone had used around the house when the story still belonged to another shape. "No. Sorry. Stomach cancer. They diagnosed it 8 months ago. It moved fast." I asked where he was staying. He said Petra's, Everett's sister. I knew Petra peripherally. Sensible woman. Stable household. I registered that as the best available outcome and moved on. "That is not the only reason I called," Rowan said. He told me about the box. It had started as a shoe box beside Everett's bed, then became a larger storage box as the years added up. Letters. All of them sealed. All addressed to me through Fordham's office. Rowan counted them after the funeral. 203. I did not respond to that. I waited. Then Rowan said Everett had left a voice recording on his phone 3 weeks before he died. He asked if he could play it. I said yes. There was a pause, the sound of Rowan moving the phone near a speaker, and then Everett's voice came through the line. Thin. Not from emotion. From illness. Whatever performance he might once have been capable of was gone. What remained was a man with limited time and something specific to say. He said he was not recording this to ask for forgiveness. He knew he was past that. He said he needed me to understand what I had actually been up against, not to lessen his responsibility, but because the full truth mattered, and he had not told it. Then he told it. Lucia had been pursuing him since before our relationship fell apart. Not casually, persistently, strategically. Over years. He said he resisted for a long time. What wore him down, he said, was not just Lucia. It was my parents. They had known what Lucia was doing. Not suspected. Known. My mother had intervened twice when Everett came close to telling me. Not to stop Lucia. To stop him. She had framed the truth as a catastrophic threat to the family. Isolated him from anyone outside our circle who might have encouraged honesty and convinced him that confessing would cost him everything, while silence was survivable. By the time the pregnancy happened, he said, his judgment had eroded. Then he stopped himself and said plainly that erosion was not innocence. He had choices. He made the wrong ones. Repeatedly. He was not asking me to reframe that. He just needed me to know I had been betrayed by more people in more coordinated ways than I had ever fully understood. The recording ended. Rowan came back on the line, breathing unevenly. I said, "Thank you for calling." A pause. Then he said, "Good night, Mom." I hung up, set the phone on the counter, and stood there for a long time. Not processing, not feeling, just occupying the room until the moment passed. Then I called Fordham. "There is a box of letters coming," I told him. "Arrange climate. Controlled archival storage. Sealed. Not destroyed." He was quiet for a beat. "Do you want them sent to you first?" "No." Par 5. After I hung up with Fordham, I put the phone face down on the counter and stood in the kitchen until the house settled back around me. Then I went to the back porch and sat in the dark, looking out toward the water. The night was cold and clear, the kind of cold that makes everything feel deliberate. I thought through what Everett's recording had actually told me. Not emotionally. Structurally, my parents' involvement was new information. Not suspicion anymore. Confirmation. My mother had intervened twice to keep him silent. My father had helped frame everything as a family stability problem rather than betrayal. They had not just failed to protect me. They had helped build the walls around the truth that landed with appropriate weight. Then I asked myself what it changed. The answer was nothing. Everett had choices. Lucia had choices. My parents had choices. Pressure is real and I do not dismiss it, but pressure is not the same as impossibility. Everett said that himself. He had made the wrong choices repeatedly, across years. My parents had their own accounting to settle. Lucia had hers. Everett's choices remained Everett's. The recording did not change my conclusions. It completed the picture. I thought about the 203 letters, 4 years of writing to an office, with no certainty I would ever read a single word. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, random Tuesdays when hope probably hurt enough to require a page. I recognized that for what it was, not love rebuilt. A waiting room he had constructed for himself. A place to put the belief that one day I might come back and give him what he needed. I was not going to read them. Not from cruelty. From accuracy. Reading them would mean pulling a thread I had deliberately, carefully, correctly cut. I already had the ending. Everett's own voice had delivered it. I did not need 203 variations of the chapters. The next morning, I confirmed the storage arrangement with Fordham. Climate-controlled archival storage. Sealed. Logged. Not destroyed. He handled it without further questions, which is why I have kept him for 10 years. I also instructed him to set up a direct financial account for Rowan. Structured, consistent, routed to him personally, instead of through anyone else's household. He had my number now. If he needed something I could provide, he could call. That was the extent of what I arranged. It was enough. I did not attend Everett's funeral. I did not travel. There was nothing there that required my presence. The people gathered in that room were people who had, in various degrees, participated in dismantling my life. I had nothing to offer and nothing to collect. Over the following months, details arrived through Fordham and 2 short calls from Rowan. We did not reach for more than we could hold. Drakehold Construction sold what remained of itself at a significant loss. My parents moved to a smaller house in a quieter suburb. My father's health became unreliable. My mother tried to send a message through Rowan saying she wanted to speak with me. Rowan delivered it verbatim, just as I raised him to be direct. I received it, I told him. I did not respond to her. Lucia was working a mid-level project coordination job on the other side of the country. Not destroyed, not thriving, just reduced to the scale her actual abilities had always justified. She had a repayment plan that would follow her for years, a new partner, and a son she was not consistently present for. Roman, I was pleased to learn, had moved cities and built a professional reputation entirely his own. Good. He deserved that. I think about mercy sometimes. What it is, what it costs, where the supply ends. Everett spent 4 years waiting for a knock on a door I had already sealed from the outside. I could have given him closure. I chose not to. I do not carry that choice with shame or satisfaction. I carry it the way you carry, a correct decision made under difficult conditions, cleanly, without revisiting it. The last thing he learned was that some betrayals are too deep, too sustained, and too deliberately constructed for mercy to remain available. Not because the person wronged is incapable of mercy, but because it has already been spent, drawn down slowly by people who counted on it always being there. He died waiting for something that no longer existed. I went back inside. I started dinner,